Out in the fading light of a frontier town, the wind whispered secrets through the dusty streets. Shadows danced as the sun dipped behind the dry hills, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It was a time when law and chaos walked hand in hand, kissed by danger and desire. It was here, in this rough-hewn town of Ironwood, that a love story unfolded, one marked by loyalty, defiance, and the price of protection. The sheriff, a tall man with a dark mustache and eyes like steel, stood at the edge of the saloon, watching the gamblers and drunks mingle. His name was John Hargrove, a man respected but feared, embodying the spirit of a lawman who had seen it all. He'd once been a firebrand with dreams of grandeur, but the hard realities of upholding the law had tempered him into a resolute protector. He'd put away criminals who thought themselves invincible, but nothing prepared him for the danger that came in the form of a young woman, Isabel. Isabel Allen was the outlaw's daughter, formidable in her own right. Her father, a notorious bandit who'd run wild over the plains, had seen his glory days crumble under the weight of his crimes. She had inherited her father's fire, fierce, unyielding, with a spirit as wild as the herds that roamed the land. Despite her lineage, or perhaps because of it, Isabel knew the dangers that lurked in the shadows. The townsfolk were wary, and the whispers of her past clung to her like a coat of mud. But she walked tall, head held high, confronting the world on her own terms. Late one night, after the saloon had emptied, the moon hung high, bathing the town in silver. The sheriff, weary from a long day, was making his way home when he heard a commotion near the old abandoned church. He stepped cautiously, each stride echoing the heavy silence. Then out of the shadows emerged Isabel, her long hair flowing like a river behind her. But she wasn't alone. Two men, rough and ready for trouble, had cornered her. Isabel shouted, her voice steady but laced with fear. "Just a little chat, darling," one of them sneered, stepping closer. The situation shifted from intense to explosive in a heartbeat. Before Hargrove could even process it, he sprang into action, his heart pounding like a drum. The sheriff pulled his revolver, aimed true, and fired a warning shot into the ground, sending shockwaves through the night. The thugs turned, faces pale, realizing the law had arrived. Without hesitation, they bolted into the darkness. Isabel looked at Hargrove wide-eyed. She had expected many things, but not the sheriff's intervention. She stammered, her brave facade slipping. "Because someone has to keep this town safe," he replied, his voice low and firm. There was a tension between them, a current of unspoken words. Hargrove felt drawn to her, the fire in her spirit igniting something long dormant in his own heart. In the following days, the threat of violence loomed ever larger. Rumors spread like wildfire. Isabel's father was planning one last heist, a desperate bid to secure his family's legacy. Hargrove knew the stakes were high. It wasn't just the town that was at risk, but Isabel's life as well. The sheriff found himself at the edges of Isabel's world, drawn into her orbit. They'd meet in secret under the cloak of night, sharing their dreams and fears. He learned of her father's pain, the way he had spiraled from the man he once was into a ghost of regret. In turn, she understood the burden Hargrove bore, standing alone between law and chaos. One stormy evening, Isabel arrived at the sheriff's office, eyes wild. Rain poured down, lightning illuminating her face. She was soaked to the bone, but it was the fire in her gaze that ignited the room. "He's planning it," she gasped, breathless. "The heist. It's tomorrow night." Hargrove's heart raced, pounding against his chest like a war drum. Every instinct told him he needed to take action, but a different kind of battle raged within him. The outlaw was not just a criminal, he was a father, a man desperate for redemption. "I can't just arrest him, Isabel," Hargrove said, his voice a blend of authority and tenderness. "And what do you propose? Let him hurt the town?" Isabel's voice broke, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. Hargrove felt a sharp tug at his heart. He knew she was right. In the stillness that followed, something flickered between them, a spark of understanding that cast aside their history, a connection deeper than circumstance. "I'll do everything I can to protect you," he promised, swallowing the lump in his throat. He hoped she wouldn't see the resolve masked by the fear that he may fail. As the clock struck midnight the next evening, The storm raged on outside, mirroring the turmoil within. Hargrove and his deputies lay in wait near the town's bank, knowing the heist was imminent. The wind howled, making the old buildings creak as they stood sentinel against the night. Despite the pounding rain, Hargrove felt uneasy, the weight of the moment pressing down upon him. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, the outlaw, his eyes wild yet pleading. Hargrove shouted, raising his gun. The outlaw froze, hands up, drenched and vulnerable. "This is your last chance." But then he offered something unexpected. "I came for Isabel. I want to see her one last time." Hargrove's resolve wavered. Behind that hardened exterior, he saw a man wanting forgiveness, a father desperate to save his daughter from the weight of his choices. But Isabel appeared, running from the cover of darkness. "No," she shouted, breathless and urgent. She pushed past Hargrove and faced her father. "You don't have to go through with this." The outlaw stood there, torn between the promise of redemption and the storm of his past. His eyes scanned the faces of the assembled townsfolk who had gathered, fear and anger etched upon every brow. Hargrove felt the gravity of every choice hanging in the air. Hargrove asked, lowering his weapon slightly, his heart racing. Outlaw exclaimed, desperation spilling from his lips. "I thought money would bring us a better life, but I see now that my choices only dug us deeper." In that moment, everything clicked for Hargrove. He stepped forward, momentum building. "Then let me protect her. Marry her," he said, the boldness of his heart steering him. The words were out before he could think. The townsfolk gasped, and in the chaos of the rain and thunder, the weight of that decision began to sink in. Isabel's eyes widened. She whispered, confusion flooding her expression, caught in a whirlwind of emotions. "Marry her and she will be safe. Your past won't touch her again," Hargrove insisted, his voice firm, full of conviction. He held his ground not just as a sheriff, but as a man who understood her worth. The outlaw met Hargrove's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. "If this is what it takes to keep her from harm," the outlaw sighed, looking defeated yet resolute. With the weight of the world upon their shoulders, Isabel and Hargrove stood before the wisps of chaos that had brought them together. The townsfolk, still twitchy but moved by the sheer audacity of it all, began to gather closer. Hargrove's heart raced. He had made a promise. He wasn't just protecting Isabel from her father's choices. He was giving her a way out, a path forged with trust, not fear. With no priest in sight, Hargrove called upon the townsfolk to witness the union, a testament to the unconventional partnership forged under fire. He took Isabel's hands into his, feeling the warmth and strength within her. She asked, searching his gaze, probing for sincerity. "Never for that. Only to help you forge your own path, away from what binds you," he said with conviction. Isabel's heart soared, her wild spirit couldn't be caged, but a bond born of respect could hold the weight of the world together. "Then yes," she breathed, her voice unwavering though emotion shimmered in her eyes. In the midst of the storm's fury, they declared their union amidst the warmth of newfound hope. Hand in hand, they faced the rain, the darkness, and the uncertain path ahead. Hargrove glanced at the outlaw, who, graced with a flicker of redemption, nodded. In that moment, the scars of their past fell away, replaced by the promise of a future crafted by trust and daring. Under the fury of the storm, a wildfire ignited in their hearts, stitching together the torn fabric of their lives. It was an alliance of necessity and desire, neither good nor bad, but rooted in the complexities of love and loyalty. In the days that followed, they forged a life together, sheriff and outlaw's daughter, a tale to carry through the wild winds of Ironwood. The whispers of the past faded like echoes, leaving room for new stories. Tales of bravery, love, and the unyielding spirit of a woman claimed not by her lineage, but by the choices they dared to make together. In the heart of that frontier town, midst lawlessness and longing, they built a legacy crafted not in defiance, but in a dance with fate, a bold answer to an unforgiving world. The night was alive with the sound of hooves pounding against the hard red dirt, echoing through the narrow streets of Iron Hill. Dust kicked up in thick clouds as a lone rider barreled into town, eyes wide and wild. Her name was Isabel, the outlaw's daughter, and she was running for her life. Just ahead, the sheriff's office stood like an unyielding fortress at the edge of the town square. Sheriff Thomas Baker, a man with a square jaw and a heart overshadowed by duty, was at his desk, sorting through ink-stained papers when the door slammed open. Isabel stumbled in, breathless and drenched in sweat. She gasped, locking eyes with him, her frantic energy crashing against the calmness of the room. "You have to help me." Baker's brow furrowed. He recognized the fear in her eyes. It was a mirror of his own. The rumors had been swirling. The outlaw, her father, was planning one last heist, a reckless gamble to reclaim his place in the world. And it wasn't just the money that drove him. It was the desperation of a man backed into a corner. "It's my father," she replied, her voice cracking under the weight of the reality. "He's planning to rob the bank tonight. He doesn't care who gets hurt." The sheriff's heart raced. He felt the burden of the decision weighing down on him, an invisible shackling chain linking duty to emotion. Isabel was everything he'd fought against, but there was a fire in her spirit that ignited something within him, something that couldn't be ignored. Baker asked, urgency filling his tone. "I don't know, but he'll show," she replied. Baker paced the cramped office, feeling the ticking clock mocking him with its rhythm. He glanced at Isabel, the flame of determination lighting her eyes, and he knew he couldn't let her face this alone. "We need a plan," he said, his mind shifting gears. As they strategized, every word exchanged became a thread weaving their fates closer together. Isabel shared stories of her father's past, the good man who had once looked after her, before the darkness had swallowed him whole. The love she had for him was a tumultuous river, strong and unforgiving, yet tied with the sense of duty to protect others from his choices. When the clock struck 9, Baker turned serious. "We'll need to draw him out," Isabel asked, a mix of hope and dread playing on her features. "I'm betting on it," he replied, determination radiating from his gaze. "He loves you." Baker moved quickly, gathering his deputies, each man knowing the stakes were high. Rumors of the outlaw's plans had already spread through the town, and tension electrified the air. The sheriff felt it mingle with fear, but there was something deeper inside him, a swell of urgency to protect this fierce woman who stood defiantly in his office. As night descended, the town was cloaked in darkness, but Baker could see the shapes of his men taking position near the bank. Isabel, dressed for the evening in simple yet elegant clothes, stood by him. "You'll be safe here," he said, his voice taking on a gentler tone than he intended. Isabel replied, a tremor in her voice. "He won't," Baker asserted, as much for himself as for her. The plan was set, now all they could do was wait. Just as the clock struck 10, they heard it, the sound of galloping hooves, sharp and fast. Isabel's heart raced. This was no longer theory. Baker stood at the ready, heart pounding as the door flew open. There he was, the outlaw, a shadow of the man he once was, yet still fierce in his determination. He stepped into the light like a bull in a china shop, eyes locking onto Isabel. He shouted, his voice rough and cold. Baker stepped in front of her, feeling the weight of the moment crash down like thunder. He commanded, his gun steady in hand. The tension crackled like dry grass before a wildfire as emotions churned, filling the air heavy with danger. The outlaw's voice was a mix of anger and desperation. "Stay out of this." Isabel's breath caught in her throat. "Dad, please, you can't do this." Baker could sense the storm gathering, not just outside but within. It was a battle between love and allegiance, chaos and security. The outlaw's eyes softened just a fraction as he looked at his daughter. "You want to play protectors and heroes, huh?" Isabel shouted back, voice firm, revealing a strength she had buried under layers of fear. Baker saw the flicker of hope ignite in her eyes, and for a moment he believed they could walk through this together. But in that instant, the outlaw turned back to him, rage bubbling just beneath the surface. "You think you can take my daughter away from me?" The intensity snapped Baker's focus. "I'm not trying to take her anywhere." His grip tightened around the gun he held. In the heart of that standoff, it all came rushing back, the weight of the past, the burden of choices made. Each man carried a story, and in the tension of the moment, the air thickened with unresolved histories. Then it happened. The outlaw jumped. A flash of instinct took hold, and without thinking, Baker moved to shield Isabel. But as he did, the outlaw turned his attention to the sheriff. As hooves clattered and chaos erupted outside, a gang of lawbreakers surged forward, ready for the heist Baker had known was coming. Isabel shouted. In that heartbeat, the fugitive's face shifted from anger to realization. Baker took that split second to shout to his men, "Get in position." He felt the crack of thunder echo in the distance, mirroring the chaos about to unfold. Yet as Isabel's father prepared to run, she grabbed his arm, desperation gripping her heart. "Dad," the outlaw hesitated. His daughter was the anchor holding him back from the overwhelming tide of destruction he felt pulling at him. "This is it. Your only legacy is pain." Isabel cried out, tears streaming down her cheeks. In that moment, clarity washed over the outlaw's face, soaked in realization, but an instinct for survival still surged within him. "You think you're better off without me?" "I know enough," she replied, voice quaking yet resolute. Baker interjected, stepping closer, finding himself in uncharted territory, part protector, part mediator. "You need to think, man, she's right." The silence that followed felt suffocating, stretched thin like a taut string ready to snap. The outlaw glanced between his daughter and the sheriff, two powerful forces battling within him. It was then that the sheriff took a step closer, lowering his weapon slightly. "Let's make a deal. No more violence. No more running. Marry me, Isabel." The words hung heavy in the air, and in that moment time seemed to slow. Outlaw's fury faltered, and Baker dared to hope the proposal could lead to peace. Isabel echoed, eyes wide with disbelief and confusion. It felt surreal, a wild proposition pulled from the depths of chaos, but she could see the resolve reflected in Baker's eyes, offering a sanctuary in a storm. "Yes," the sheriff said, his voice carrying weight. "A marriage of protection. You are more than a pawn in a game, you are a woman fighting for her freedom." Tears streamed down Isabel's face as she looked at her father. This was not the future she envisioned, yet the alternative felt as treacherous as the tempest threatening to sweep through town. "If you choose him, you'll be trading one prison for another," the outlaw warned, desperation creeping back into his voice. But Isabel stood her ground, courage flooding her, heart racing. "No, this is my choice to make. I don't want to be tied to your choices anymore." Baker met her gaze, and in that moment their souls connected, a promise held in the space between them, forged from fear, hope, and an undeniable truth. "Then let's do it," she whispered, the gravity of her words settling deep within her. "Just don't forget who I am," the outlaw spat, but uncertainty lurked beneath his defiance. In that moment, whether he chose chaos or love, the decision was ultimately Isabel's. "Dad." "I'll never forget," she replied, her voice firm yet tender, reaching across the divide to the man who'd once cradled her. Baker nodded, ready to grab fate by the reins, summoning his men from the shadows. They emerged from their hideouts as if they were soldiers marching into battle, each man imbued with a fresh sense of purpose. The outlaw saw the forces gathering and knew that this would not end well for him. "Let's go," he hissed, the anger and desperation rising to the surface once more. But something remarkable happened as Isabel turned away from him. She walked right to Baker, linking arms with the sheriff, her choice made clear. "You're right, Dad, no more running." He stared after them, the sheriff ushering his daughter away from him, a symbol of resolve amidst the swirling chaos. As they rushed outside, thunder rumbled overhead, bolts of lightning splitting the night, illuminating the path before them. Baker held Isabel close, feeling the determination radiating off her. She knew they faced danger, but this was no longer about just surviving. It was about living. Together, they stood like two pillars against the storm. Baker could feel a fierce protectiveness swell within him, redefined by the love blooming between them, a love born out of courage and choice. In that stormy night, fate wove a tale of two unlikely souls bound together by unexpected circumstances, their union a testament to the strength of humanity amidst despair. They would face whatever came their way, not as sheriff and outlaw's daughter but as partners in a story yet to be written. As the rain began to fall, washing away the sins of the past, they turned towards the horizon, hand in hand, ready to face whatever storms lay ahead. The night was alive with the sound of hooves pounding against the hard red dirt, echoing through the narrow streets of Iron Hill. Dust kicked up in thick clouds as a lone rider barreled into town, eyes wide and wild. Her name was Isabel, the outlaw's daughter, and she was running for her life. Just ahead, the sheriff's office stood like an unyielding fortress at the edge of the town square. Sheriff Thomas Baker, a man with a square jaw and a heart overshadowed by duty, was at his desk, sorting through ink-stained papers when the door slammed open. Isabel stumbled in, breathless and drenched in sweat. She gasped, locking eyes with him, her frantic energy crashing against the calmness of the room. "You have to help me." Baker's brow furrowed. He recognized the fear in her eyes. It was a mirror of his own. The rumors had been swirling. The outlaw, her father, was planning one last heist, a reckless gamble to reclaim his place in the world. And it wasn't just the money that drove him. It was the desperation of a man backed into a corner. "It's my father," she replied, her voice cracking under the weight of the reality. "He's planning to rob the bank tonight. He doesn't care who gets hurt." The sheriff's heart raced. He felt the burden of the decision weighing down on him, an invisible shackling chain linking duty to emotion. Isabel was everything he'd fought against, but there was a fire in her spirit that ignited something within him, something that couldn't be ignored. Baker asked, urgency filling his tone. "I don't know, but he'll show," she replied. Baker paced the cramped office, feeling the ticking clock mocking him with its rhythm. He glanced at Isabel, the flame of determination lighting her eyes, and he knew he couldn't let her face this alone. "We need a plan," he said, his mind shifting gears. As they strategized, every word exchanged became a thread weaving their fates closer together. Isabel shared stories of her father's past, the good man who had once looked after her before the darkness had swallowed him whole. The love she had for him was a tumultuous river, strong and unforgiving, yet tied with the sense of duty to protect others from his choices. When the clock struck 9, Baker turned serious. "We'll need to draw him out," Isabel asked, a mix of hope and dread playing on her features. "I'm betting on it," he replied, determination radiating from his gaze. "He loves." Baker moved quickly, gathering his deputies, each man knowing the stakes were high. Rumors of the outlaw's plans had already spread through the town, and tension electrified the air. The sheriff felt it mingle with fear, but there was something deeper inside him, a swell of urgency to protect this fierce woman who stood defiantly in his office. As night descended, the town was cloaked in darkness, but Baker could see the shapes of his men taking position near the bank. Isabel, dressed for the evening in simple yet elegant clothes, stood by him. "You'll be safe here," he said, his voice taking on a gentler tone than he intended. Isabel replied, a tremor in her voice. "He won't," Baker asserted, as much for himself as for her. The plan was set, now all they could do was wait. Just as the clock struck 10, they heard it, the sound of galloping hooves, sharp and fast. Isabel's heart raced. This was no longer theory. Baker stood at the ready, heart pounding as the door flew open. There he was, the outlaw, a shadow of the man he once was, yet still fierce in his determination. He stepped into the light like a bull in a china shop, eyes locking onto Isabel. He shouted, his voice rough and cold. Baker stepped in front of her, feeling the weight of the moment crash down like thunder. He commanded, his gun steady in hand. The tension crackled like dry grass before a wildfire as emotions churned, filling the air heavy with danger. The outlaw's voice was a mix of anger and desperation. "Stay out of this." Isabel's breath caught in her throat. "Dad, please, you can't do this." Baker could sense the storm gathering, not just outside but within. It was a battle between love and allegiance, chaos and security. The outlaw's eyes softened just a fraction as he looked at his daughter. "You want to play protectors and heroes, huh?" Isabel shouted back, voice firm, revealing a strength she had buried under layers of fear. Baker saw the flicker of hope ignite in her eyes, and for a moment he believed they could walk through this together. But in that instant, the outlaw turned his attention to the sheriff. As hooves clattered and chaos erupted outside, a gang of lawbreakers surged forward, ready for the heist Baker had known was coming. Isabel shouted. In that heartbeat, the fugitive's face shifted from anger to realization. Baker took that split second to shout to his men, "Get in position." He felt the crack of thunder echo in the distance, mirroring the chaos about to unfold. Yet, as Isabel's father prepared to run, she grabbed his arm, desperation gripping her heart. "Dad." The outlaw hesitated. His daughter was the anchor holding him back from the overwhelming tide of destruction he felt pulling at him. You think you're better off without me. I know enough, she replied, voice quaking yet resolute. Baker interjected, stepping closer, finding himself in uncharted territory, part protector, part mediator. You need to think, man, she's right. The silence that followed felt suffocating, stretched thin like a taut string ready to snap. The outlaw glanced between his daughter and the sheriff, two powerful forces battling within him. It was then that the sheriff took a step closer, lowering his weapon slightly. Let's make a deal. No more violence. No more running. Marry me, Isabel. The words hung heavy in the air, and in that moment time seemed to slow. The outlaw's fury faltered, and Baker dared to hope the proposal could lead to peace. Isabel echoed, eyes wide with disbelief and confusion. It felt surreal, a wild proposition pulled from the depths of chaos. But she could see the resolve reflected in Baker's eyes, offering a sanctuary in a storm. Yes, the sheriff said, his voice carrying weight. A marriage of protection. You are more than a pawn in a game. You are a woman fighting for her freedom. Tears streamed down Isabel's face as she looked at her father. This was not the future she envisioned, yet the alternative felt as treacherous as the tempest threatening to sweep through town. If you choose him, you'll be trading one prison for another, the outlaw warned, desperation creeping back into his voice. But Isabel stood her ground, courage flooding her, heart racing. No, this is my choice to make. I don't want to be tied to your choices anymore. Baker nodded, ready to grab fate by the reins, summoning his men from the shadows. They emerged from their hideouts as if they were soldiers marching into battle, each man imbued with a fresh sense of purpose. The outlaw saw the forces gathering and knew that this would not end well for him. Let's go, he hissed, the anger and desperation rising to the surface once more. But something remarkable happened as Isabel turned away from him. She walked right to Baker, linking arms with the sheriff, her choice made clear. You're right, Dad, no more running. He stared after them, the sheriff ushering his daughter away from him, a symbol of resolve amidst the swirling chaos. As they rushed outside, thunder rumbled overhead, bolts of lightning splitting the night, illuminating the path before them. Baker held Isabel close, feeling the determination radiating off her. She knew they faced danger, but this was no longer about just surviving. It was about living. Together, they stood like two pillars against the storm. Baker could feel a fierce protectiveness swell within him, redefined by the love blooming between them, a love born out of courage and choice. In that stormy night, fate wove a tale of two unlikely souls bound together by unexpected circumstances, their union a testament to the strength of humanity amidst despair. They would face whatever came their way, not as sheriff and outlaw's daughter but as partners in a story yet to be written. As the rain began to fall, washing away the sins of the past, they turned towards the horizon, hand in hand, ready to face whatever storms lay ahead. The future might be uncertain, but their hearts burned brightly, forging a path of hope, courage, and an unbreakable bond that no outlaw could sever. Under the thick, brooding sky of a quiet frontier town, the sound of horses thundered like a storm on the horizon. Dust rose from the ground and hung momentarily in the air before settling like a shroud over the open space between the saloon and the sheriff's office. Calm before the storm, it was a restless time, where danger and desperation whispered secrets in every shadow. In the heart of this chaos was Sheriff Jack Callahan. A man of the law, he carried a heavy badge on his chest and the weight of the town's safety on his shoulders. Tall and rugged, Jack had seen more than his share of trouble. His eyes held stories of triumph, loss, and the relentless battle of good against evil. Ironwood was his home, but it was also a battlefield. And at the edge of this battlefield stood Isabel, the outlaw's daughter. She was as fierce as the fiery sunset that lit the horizon, a wild spirit trapped in the chains of her father's criminal legacy. Clad in a simple dress that fluttered with the wind, Isabel carried hope and burden in equal measure. She didn't just want to escape her father's shadow, she wanted to forge her own future. But the night that set events in motion began simply, with a scream piercing through the stillness, a sound that sent icy fingers down Jack's spine. He had been at the bar nursing a drink when the urgency of that cry yanked him back to reality. Without a second thought, he bolted from the saloon and into the night, his heart thundering in rhythm with the approaching chaos. His feet pounded against the sandy ground until he reached the edge of the town, where he found Isabel, breathless, eyes wide with terror. She shouted, her voice trembling like a leaf caught in a gale. Jack's instincts kicked in. He drew his revolver, scanning the darkness for threats. He demanded, his voice steady. "My father and his gang. They've done something terrible, something that'll make them come after me." Isabel's voice cracked, desperation spilling over. Jack felt a pang in his chest. He had heard whispers of the outlaw, the notorious Jeremiah Allen, a man known for tearing through towns like a runaway freight train. The danger was real, and it was closing in fast. "You can't stay here. We need to find a safe place," he replied, urgency fueling his words. She protested, shaking her head with fierce determination. "I can't run anymore, Sheriff. If I disappear, they'll think I want to escape." Jack saw it in her eyes, the fire, the loyalty, the strength that had once been masked by fear. It was a quality he respected. "All right," he breathed, searching for a way to protect her and keep his promise to the town. "Then let's draw them away." Time began to tick away as they strategized. Jack could feel the weight of their predicament pressing down on him. Isabel shared stories of her father's past, how he had once fought for justice before his descent into lawlessness. Broken by regret and loss, Jeremiah was a man who had lost his way. But Isabel wasn't just a victim. She was a fierce warrior in her own right, driven by love for the one who had brought her into this world, even if he had turned to darkness. When the clock struck 10, Jack's heart raced. "You'll need to go somewhere safe," he planned aloud, trying to map out each moment in his mind. "I can't just leave my father to wreak havoc," Isabel insisted, her defiance adding fuel to the fire within him. "Then let's face it together," Jack replied, a surprising sense of conviction washing over him. "I'll help you confront him." Just as the words left his mouth, the distant sound of galloping hooves broke through the air, a bone-chilling reminder that time was running out. Jack and Isabel exchanged glances, an unspoken agreement passing between them. They rushed to a nearby shed, pulling closed the creaking wooden door, hearts drumming like war drums. The wind howled and the night deepened, thickening the air with tension. They could hear the men approaching, their voices rough and filled with deadly intent. Jack squeezed his revolver tighter, adrenaline coiling in his veins like a spring ready to snap. A voice called out from the darkness. It was Jeremiah, shadowed by his gang, a figure that loomed larger than life. Jack stepped out of the shed, steady and resolute, determination written across his weathered face. "I won't let you harm her," he declared with a fierce conviction. Jeremiah's eyes narrowed, a storm brewing within. "You think you can stand between me and my daughter?" Isabel stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. "Dad, this isn't the way. Don't do this." For a moment, the desperation in her words seemed to reach the long-buried part of him, the part that had once cared. But the shadows cast by his choices loomed too large. "You don't understand, Isabel. They've taken everything from me. I won't let them take you, too." Jack interjected, stepping closer, adrenaline coursing through his body. "You can't save her this way." Tension crackled in the air, thickening like smoke before a fire. Jack felt the anxiety rise, mingled with an unfamiliar sense of responsibility. He remembered the stories he had been told, the moments when love truly made men change, when the weight of their actions could bring about redemption or ruin. The outlaw hesitated, and in that moment, Jack saw the flicker of humanity still alive beneath the layers of anger and despair. "It doesn't have to end this way," Jack said, voice steady. "We can protect her." But every argument seemed to breeze past Jeremiah, absorbed in his turmoil. "You don't know what it's like. You couldn't possibly understand the pain of losing everything," he shouted, raw emotion spilling out. Jack turned to Isabel. "There's a chance," he murmured, weighing the heavy responsibility on his shoulders. "We could create a bonded deal." Isabel looked at him, determination pulsating beneath her fear. "Let's get married, here and now. It will give you protection, and he'll have to back down." Isabel blinked, momentarily grasping onto the wildness of his proposition. "Marry you." Jack nodded, his eyes locked onto hers, resolute and unyielding. Jeremiah's anger turned to disbelief as he looked at his daughter. "You choose him over me," Isabel shouted, voice unwavering. The outlaw's expression shifted again, a maelstrom of emotion swirling within him. Jack saw it, the uncertainty, the love battling with selfishness. The future could shift with a single choice. Jeremiah began, his tone softened but firm. Jack stepped closer to her, heart racing. "Trust me. Believe that we can navigate through this," he said, searching her eyes for that flicker of faith. The air was tense, hearts pounding in synchronized rhythms. The shadows of the night lingered around them, heavy and oppressive. "All right," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. In that moment, Jack felt a surge of hope, a bond being forged from necessity, love, and courage. He turned toward the approaching gang once more, standing defiant between them. "Then let's make this happen," Jack said, his voice unwavering. Jeremiah fell silent, rage giving way to something softer, a hint of understanding. "You won't take her from me," he warned, voice low and dangerous. Jack faced him squarely. "No one is taking her from you." Rumbling thunder echoed, amplifying the tension in the air as they prepared. Baker gathered the courage deep within him, channeling all of it into the resolute words that would forever change their lives. "Let's do it," he said, determination surging like a tidal wave. Just then, the gathered townsfolk, alerted by the chaos, began to emerge from their homes like moths drawn to light. Concerned faces filled the small square, the stakes rising as whispers began to weave through the crowd. In the eye of the storm, they stood Jack, Isabel, and Jeremiah. Each carried their burden, and in that weight lay a choice that could change everything. Amidst the tension, they found an unexpected ally in the townsfolk. The collective fear of losing everything ignited a spark of solidarity in their hearts. People stepped forward, murmuring their support and standing behind Isabel. "You'll never be alone again, Isabel," Jack promised, locking eyes with her. As the murmurs grew louder, Jeremiah heard them, the townsfolk's rallying call against chaos, a force unleashed by the shadows of a father's choices. In that moment of vulnerability, a flicker of realization crossed his face. Maybe I've lost my way," he admitted, voice trembling on the precipice of his emotional abyss. With hearts pounding and futures uncertain, Isabel stepped closer to her father. "Dad, this is your chance to change. You can still be the man you once were." The outlaw looked at Jack, then back at Isabel. The shadows of his past loomed large, but amidst the chaos, a path forward began to emerge. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, the whispers of hope flickered through the darkness. "Perhaps I can step aside," Jeremiah whispered, like a breath of wind blowing the first leaves of spring. Jack looked at Isabel, hope shimmering in his eyes. As he stepped forward, a spark of connection ignited between them. He understood this was not just a momentary choice. It was the beginning of a new journey. Isabel reached for Jack's hand, feeling the warmth and commitment radiating from him, a lifeline in a world that had once felt swallowed by shadows. They stood resolutely together as the storm began to ease, revealing the dawn. In that quiet morning light, with threads of fate woven together, Jack and Isabel became partners, not just in love but in purpose. As the townsfolk cheered, support enveloped them like a protective shield, casting away the fears of the past. Jeremiah watched, battling within himself, but he understood he had a second chance too. The legacy he had unwittingly built could be rebuilt, not founded on the ashes of regret, but on the hope of forgiveness, a bridge that would lead to freedom instead of ruin. And as the first light of day broke over Ironwood, the newfound family, born from chaos, forged a path into a future painted with the colors of empowerment, love, and courage. The sheriff, the outlaw's daughter, and the man seeking redemption stood as a testament to the strength of choice and hope, reshaping their destinies together, one intentional step at a time. The night erupted in chaos, a cacophony of shouts and galloping hooves echoing through the narrow streets of Ironwood. A lone rider, hair flying like a frenzied flag, burst into town as if chased by ghosts. The townsfolk turned, eyes wide, knowing well the legacy she bore on her shoulders. Isabel Allen, the outlaw's daughter, had arrived, and trouble was sure to follow. The sheriff, a man named Clay Hawthorne, sat at his desk in the dim light of his office. He was a stocky figure, strong in stature, with a jaw set like granite. His eyes, sharp and piercing, had seen too much in the rough and tumble life of frontier law enforcement. Clay prided himself on keeping the peace in a place where the line between law and lawlessness was razor-thin. But even he knew the night would test that resolve. When the door burst open and Isabel stumbled inside, breathless and trembling, the dark clouds outside seemed to close in even tighter. "Sheriff," she cried, her voice a mix of fear and urgency. Clay stood instantly, his instincts kicking in. "They're coming for me, my father. He's lost it." Panic shimmered in her dark eyes, and Clay felt a knot tighten in his gut. "Calm down." She shook her head fervently. "No, if I run, it'll only put the town in more danger. You have to understand my father won't stop until he gets what he wants." Clay considered her words carefully. He could feel the storm brewing not only outside but within the very heart of the town he had sworn to protect. Yes, and it won't just be him. The outlaws were more than mere criminals. They were a family bound by blood and shared history. Clay had heard the stories of men who never backed down, who spilled blood just to prove a point. And now that legacy threatened to spill into Ironwood. "Then we need a plan," he said, resolve hardening in his voice. "But you need to trust me, Isabel." Isabel nodded, fear still etched across her face, but a flicker of determination began to light her eyes. The bond between them was unexpected, forged in fire and fear. She had heard tales of the sheriff's courage, and now she saw it embodied in his willingness to stand beside her, to protect her at all costs. Just then the sound of hooves thudded ominously outside. Clay grabbed his revolver, instinct pushing him forward. He commanded as Isabel quickly ducked behind the sturdy wooden desk, her heart racing. The door swung open with a crash, and in stepped a figure cloaked in shadow. It was Jeremiah Allen, the infamous outlaw, Isabel's father, his presence dominating the room like a thunderstorm. His face was weathered, eyes cold as steel, and the air crackled with danger. He growled, scanning the room until his gaze landed on Isabel. Clay stepped forward, standing tall. "You need to leave now, Jeremiah. This isn't your home anymore." Jeremiah's laugh was dark, almost cruel. "Care? You think I care? You've got it all wrong, Sheriff." As the tension thickened, Isabel jumped to her feet, shaking. "Dad, please, this isn't the way." The outlaw's gaze shifted from defiance to anger, his features twisting. "You think I'm a monster? I'm doing this for us, Isabel." Clay felt the pulse of the moment, the weight of words hanging precariously in the air. The fear, the desperation, it could all turn into chaos in the blink of an eye. "Jeremiah," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "this is about more than family. You're not the same man you used to be." "Don't lecture me about danger," Jeremiah spat back, his face thunderous. "You think you can raise my daughter in peace?" The outlaws were unpredictable, driven by instinct and loyalty. Clay knew it wouldn't take much for Jeremiah to unleash chaos upon the town, and all of them would pay the price. "Then help me protect her," Clay urged, feeling the tide of desperation sweep around them. That moment of vulnerability, that flicker of connection, the idea of redemption passed through Jeremiah's hardened exterior. A battle raged in his eyes, but the anger still lurked just beneath the surface. The pressure built like a storm ready to break. Isabel stepped forward, driven by the need to protect the town she loved. "Dad, this isn't who you are. You taught me better than this." Jeremiah's facade began to crack, and in that fleeting moment, vulnerability replaced anger. Clay saw it too. This man still held the remnants of a father beneath the weight of the outlaw. Jeremiah's voice dropped, a quiet sorrow seeping through. "We can work together," Clay urged, heart pounding in his chest. "But you need to trust me. This is about more than just you, it's about Isabel." Silence hung in the room, thick as molasses, and the world outside faded away. For a moment, Jeremiah looked lost between the terror of losing his daughter and the haunting knowledge of what he had become. He finally said, the weight of defeat hanging in his words. Isabel's breath caught in her throat, tears welling as she faced the father who had meant the world to her. "You won't lose me. You can still be in my life." The tension pulsed like a river, ready to overflow. Clay felt the moment slipping away, and suddenly he knew the bold step he needed to take. He blurted out, the words tumbling from his lips before he could think. Jeremiah echoed, disbelief coloring his voice. "Marry me, Isabel," Clay said, heart racing as the depth of his impulse took hold. "If you marry me, Jeremiah won't have a reason to come after you." Isabel blinked, absorbing the weight of his words. It was a gamble, a risk that could either save her or ruin everything. But she felt the strength of Clay's resolve, how fiercely he believed in protection, hope, and her right to choose her path. "Is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," he replied, intensity in his gaze. "I will protect you with everything I've got." Jeremiah watched, torn between anger and something resembling hope. "You'd marry him?" His voice trembled, the weight of his decisions bearing down on him. "Yes, Dad," Isabel admitted, stepping closer to Clay. "I deserve to live a life free of fear." The tension in the room hung thick, fraught with potential. Clay stood resolute in his commitment, ready to shield her from any fallout. "Jeremiah, you need to understand that this is not about taking her away." Jeremiah's expression wavered, fear and anger wrestling within him. "I know it can," Clay insisted, sincerity suffusing his voice. "She'll be safe from the chaos you've created." Silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Jeremiah faltered, vulnerability creeping in, edging past the walls he had built around himself. Clay nodded, understanding the depth of that love, that need to protect. "Then let's fight for a better future," he said softly. "Let's find a path where you don't have to lose your daughter." After what felt like an eternity, Jeremiah seemed to relent, the weight of the world pulling him down. "I just want what's best for her," he rasped. "But..." Isabel stepped forward, reaching for her father's hand. "It's not too late, Dad. We can make this work." Jeremiah looked up, the storm that had raged within him now calming, if only for a moment. "Fine," he said, though his gaze still shimmered with conflict. Clay's heart surged with hope, feeling the warmth of the moment sweep over them. "Then let's do it." The townsfolk began to gather around the sheriff's office, drawn by the commotion. They watched as this small piece of history unfolded, the sense of community cementing through solidarity. Clay turned to the assembled crowd, a wave of purpose swelling through him. "Gather a preacher." Isabel stared at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and exhilaration. She whispered. "Yes," Clay replied, a grin breaking through the tension of the moment. As they prepared for an unexpected ceremony in the sparse moonlight, Isabel felt her heart race, fluttering with the fear of the unknown, but grounded by the strength of the man at her side. It was a bold leap into the depths of uncertainty, but it was a leap she was ready to take. With the townsfolk creating a circle of support, the preacher stepped forward, reflecting on the unlikely situation that had brought them together. Under the soft glow of stars, they exchanged vows, words filled with promise, trust, and the raw power of choice. "I stand here with you, Isabel Allen," Clay declared, his voice ringing clear and unwavering. As she listened to him, Isabel felt a weight lift from her shoulders, as if the chains binding her to her father's legacy began to dissolve in the light of a new dawn. "And I stand with you, Sheriff Clay Hawthorne," she replied, every word infused with newfound strength. Jeremiah stood silently, grappling with the swift currents of change, but seeing the light in his daughter's eyes made it a little easier. He stepped back, accepting perhaps for the first time that the world he had created for her had become a cage, one she had the right to break free from. With each word spoken in solidarity, the bonds of love began to knit the threads of their lives together. Clay and Isabel had carved out a new path between them, one where they would confront their future hand in hand, transformative and vibrant. As the stars twinkled overhead, they sealed their vows with a kiss, sealing a promise made in the fires of chaos. In that moment, she felt safe, truly safe, for the first time in years. The town erupted in cheers, a symphony of hope echoing through the night, resounding like the heartbeat of a community that knows what it means to stand together. In the days that followed, as the sun rose over Ironwood, life took on a new rhythm. Slowly, the shadows of despair began to recede, and hope blossomed like wildflowers all around. Clay and Isabel forged a bond that redefined them, and Jeremiah found himself coming to terms with the choices he had made and the second chance he could still embrace. The sheriff married an outlaw's daughter, not out of obligation, but out of a fierce dedication to protect her. And together, they built a legacy, not bound by blood, but woven in the intricate threads of choice, courage, and love. Ironwood stood witness to a transformed future, where every heartbeat echoed the promise that they were stronger together than they had ever been apart. The moon hung full and bright over the dusty town of Ironwood, casting silvery shadows that danced along the narrow streets. The air crackled with tension as a figure cut through the night, her silhouette sharp against the desolate landscape. Isabel Allen, daughter of the town's notorious outlaw, was racing against time. Tonight, she was not just running for her life. She was running to save her town from the wrath of her father, a man whose heart had turned dark with his choices. Isabel's chest heaved with each desperate step, fear coiling around her like a vice. She knew that the shadows she was fleeing weren't just memories of past pain. They were living, breathing threats. "Sheriff!" Isabel shouted as she burst through the door of the sheriff's office, urgency echoing in her voice. The sheriff's office was dimly lit, the wooden beams creaking under the weight of silence and secrets. Clay Hawthorne was sitting behind his desk, his square jaw set with determination as he absent-mindedly polished his revolver. He looked up, startled by her sudden appearance. "Isabel," she interrupted, panic threading through her every word. "My father is coming." Clay's heart raced. He had heard the rumors. Jeremiah Allen was not just a bandit. He was a force of nature, a man broken by desperation and grief. If he was coming for his daughter, it meant chaos was not far behind. Clay demanded, rising from his seat, his instincts kicking in. "I don't know, that's what makes this so dangerous. He's got men." Clay felt a sick sense of urgency growing within him. He had sworn to protect this town, but the threat hadn't felt so personal until this moment. Isabel was no mere bystander. She was caught in the crossfire of her father's choices. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said, moving with purpose. "No, if I run, it'll put everyone in more danger. My father needs to think he can control me, that I'm just a pawn in his game," Isabel replied fiercely, the fire in her eyes igniting a flicker of admiration in Clay's chest. Clay snapped, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on him. Her voice trembled with a mix of fear and ardor. The words hit Clay hard. Isabel's passion was evident, and he realized he was not merely facing a threat to her life. He was confronting the very essence of family, loyalty, and love. "Then we draw him out," he decided, his tone final. "If he thinks you're a target, he'll come for you." The two of them began to formulate a plan as the clock ratcheted closer to calamity. Clay worked through every scenario, the tension building like an impending storm. Isabel shared stories of her father's past, a man who had once fought against injustice, but whose heart had hardened into something nearly unrecognizable. Each tale wove its way into Clay's understanding of who Jeremiah once was and then who he had become. "He's still my father," Isabel said, her voice haunted yet strong. "I've watched him lose himself, forget who he is." Clay felt a mixture of admiration and sorrow swirl within him. He asked quietly. "Anything," she replied instantly. As the night deepened, they prepared. Clay could feel the impending confrontation in the very marrow of his bones, a visceral response that only heightened his instincts. He made a promise, a vow that he would protect her at all costs. They set the plan into motion, the air thick with anticipation. As moments passed like molasses, tension coiled tighter, the sound of hooves pounding toward them setting his heart racing. It wasn't long before the unmistakable sound of raucous laughter filled the air, and the shadows of men riding hard loomed closer through the thick dust. "Get ready," Clay urged, his heart hammering in his chest. They took their positions, and the atmosphere shifted, pregnant with the promise of chaos. The outlaw gang rode into town, a wild pack driven by loyalty to Jeremiah. Clay stood firm, ready to confront whatever violence may come, determined to protect Isabel at all costs. And then he saw him, Jeremiah, a hulking figure cloaked in darkness, eyes glinting with the mania of a predator who had lost his way. He boomed, the very air vibrating with his fury. Clay stepped forward, resolute. "You need to leave, Jeremiah." Jeremiah turned to face him, his gaze filled with contempt. "You think you can stand in my way, Sheriff? She's mine." "She's not a possession, Jeremiah," Clay shot back, unyielding. Isabel stepped from behind Clay, her voice clear and strong. "Dad, please, this isn't the answer." Jeremiah yelled, his temper flaring, but Clay could see the battle within him, the struggle between the man he had been and the monster he had become. Tension crackled in the night air, thick like fog. Clay felt the world narrowing as the two men stood poised for combat. "I'm not asking for permission," Jeremiah said, his voice dangerously low. Just then Clay made a decision. "Let me marry her," he said, the words bursting forth like a dam breaking. "If you marry her, it'll keep her safe, all the madness will end." Jeremiah froze, taken aback, the fierceness in his gaze momentarily extinguished. Isabel looked up at Clay, disbelief swimming in her eyes. "Marry me?" "Yes," Clay insisted, looking at her with fierce determination. "It's your chance for freedom." Jeremiah's face turned hard as he processed the bold proposition. A part of him recoiled. He loved Isabel, yes, but that love was tangled in the wreckage of his decisions. He spat, anger boiling to the surface yet softly mingled with vulnerability. Clay shot back, heart pounding with urgency. "You're hurting her in this town. The life you've chosen has consequences." Isabel stepped closer to her father, her voice quaking yet resolute. "Dad, I want to marry him. He's not replacing you, but you're destroying everything we have." A silence filled the air, thick with choices yet to be made, lives yet to be lived. Clay stepped forward, filled with conviction, the urgency of the moment pushing him. "You've lost your way, Jeremiah, but it's not too late to turn back. That's what love does, it redeems." For a moment it seemed as if the weight of the world had crashed down on Jeremiah's shoulders, but desperation clawed at him. He whispered, fear slithering through his voice. Isabel cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. The standoff felt eternal, emotions ran high, and Clay stood firm, his heart racing. Then, in a moment of fragility, Jeremiah's facade began to crack. He murmured, pain lacing through every word. Jeremiah looked at Clay, then at Isabel, the love in his heart battling against years of darkness. He asked finally, voice trembling. "Yes," Clay affirmed, his resolve unwavering. "Let's protect her." As if a dam had burst, the air shifted. Jeremiah nodded slowly, a realization dawning on him, the terror of losing his daughter battling with the need for redemption. "Fine," he said, his voice weary. In that moment, the shadows of the past began to pull back. The townsfolk who had gathered at the periphery began to sense the tide turning. They witnessed a shift in the atmosphere, a pivot toward hope instead of despair. Clay turned to the townsfolk. He called, his voice ringing clear. The townspeople moved closer, their gaze filled with curiosity and reverence. Isabel's heart raced, filled with apprehension and hope. As Clay took her hand, a sense of peace settled within her. The preacher appeared from the crowd, glancing between the three figures, the sheriff, the daughter, and the outlaw. It was an unlikely trio, pulled together by fate and consequence. The preacher asked, his tone steady and calm. "I do," Clay replied, unwavering, the weight of his words echoing in the quiet night. Isabel looked at Clay, feeling the warmth and steadfastness radiating from him. "I do," she said, the certainty in her voice growing stronger with each passing moment. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, the townsfolk erupted in cheers, a chorus of hope echoing through the night. In that moment, Isabel felt a lightness wash over her, the burdens of her legacy falling away like autumn leaves. Jeremiah watched, a mixture of pride and pain swirling within him. He stepped back, acknowledging the new life Isabel had chosen. With their hearts united, Clay and Isabel turned toward the future, ready to face whatever came next together. Ironwood would become a different place, a town reborn on the ashes of the past, where love transformed chaos into hope. In the days that followed, life began anew. Clay and Isabel crafted a world filled with love, respect, and unyielding strength. The bond they forged became a beacon for others, illuminating the darkness that had long loomed over the town. Jeremiah found solace in their union. The shadows within him began to dissolve, replaced by the chance for redemption and healing. He became a protector too, guarding the very love he had once threatened. Together, they built a future vibrant with possibility, a legacy shaped not by violence, but by the unwavering belief that even in the darkest times, love is a force that can change everything. In Ironwood, the sheriff and the outlaw's daughter created a home forged in bravery and truth, honoring the past while embracing a profound future. They proved, against all odds, that from chaos can rise a bond that is enduring and powerful, forever intertwined in the fabric of their shared lives. The moon hung high over the dusty expanse of Ironwood, draping the town in a silver cloak that glimmered like hope desperately clinging to life. A chill swept through the streets, and the air crackled with anticipation. It was a night like any other, until the sudden sound of hooves pounding against the hard earth shattered the stillness. Dust billowed in clouds as a rider galloped into town, wild-eyed and breathless. Isabel Allen, the notorious outlaw's daughter, was on the run. She could feel her heart racing, pounding against her ribcage like a frightened bird seeking escape. She knew her father, the infamous Jeremiah Allen, was closing in, and he wouldn't stop until he caught her. He had lost himself in darkness, turning a once honorable man into a ruthless outlaw, and Isabel feared he would soon unleash that darkness upon the very town she loved. She burst through the doors of the sheriff's office, practically falling into the room. Clay Hawthorne, the town's sheriff, looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. Clay was a man of the law, strong and unwavering, with the kind of presence that commanded respect. His dark hair framed a face etched with experience, a man who had seen more than his fair share of trouble. "Isabel?" he asked, rising from his chair, instinctively preparing for danger. She gasped, urgency coursing through her. "My father is coming." Clay's heart sank. He had heard the rumors. Jeremiah was a walking storm capable of wreaking havoc, and Isabel was caught in the crossfire. "We need to get you out of town," he said, moving closer, his voice steady. "No, if I go, he'll see it as a victory. He'll think he can control me, that I'm just a pawn in his game," Isabel replied fiercely, determination flashing in her eyes. Clay stared at her, a mix of admiration and concern swirling within him. "This isn't a game, Isabel," she exclaimed, her voice growing louder, fueled by righteous anger. "My father is dangerous, and if I run, he'll devastate everything we've built here." He could feel the weight of her fear, pressing down on both of their shoulders. Clay knew Jeremiah Allen was a man unmatched in his resolve, and to confront him would mean walking a treacherous line. "If we can draw him out, get him to confront us instead of hiding in the shadows, we might stand a chance," he finally proposed, his heart racing at the thought. Isabel nodded. Yes. They moved quickly, urgency fueling their every step. Clay felt the tension building between them, a palpable force like a storm brewing on the horizon. Together they devised a plan, each moment stretching like a taut line ready to snap. Isabel spoke of her father's past, how once he had been a protector of the helpless, a man inspired by love and family. Slowly, the monster had emerged, one act of desperation after another, leading to a devil he could no longer recognize. "We can't allow him to drag you down with him," Clay said, his voice firm. The plan was set. As night deepened and the stars twinkled overhead, both individuals felt the weight of impending confrontation. Clay had made a promise to protect Isabel, but now his commitment stretched beyond that. He had a duty to the town, and the role of defense fell heavily on his shoulders. Just then, the dust kicked up outside like an ominous warning, accompanied by the rapid beat of hooves. Clay turned to Isabel, ready for whatever chaos was about to erupt. He commanded, adrenaline flooding through his veins. As the sound grew closer, the sheriff pushed open the door and stepped out into the night, gun drawn and heart pounding. The atmosphere crackled and the tension hung in the air, heavy and electric. Jeremiah burst into view, his men following suit, a dark cloud of fury and force. Clay squared his shoulders, determination solidifying in his heart. The outlaw held a commanding presence, his face etched with lines of anger and heartbreak. He radiated chaos. Jeremiah growled, his voice deep and menacing. "She's not your property, Jeremiah." Clay stood his ground, each word a shield for the town and for Isabel. Jeremiah shot back, eyes blazing. Isabel pleaded, stepping forward slightly yet sticking close to Clay. A moment of vulnerability flickered across Jeremiah's face, a flicker soon swallowed by rage. "You think you can run away from me?" Clay stepped closer, his voice steady. "You've lost your way, Jeremiah. The man you were has been buried beneath your choices." Jeremiah thundered, getting closer. Isabel, caught between the two men, felt the world spinning around her. "Dad, you taught me to stand up for what's right." Her voice shook, but her spirit stayed resolute. Clay understood the stakes at hand, the past weighed heavily on their shoulders, but Isabel's plea offered a glimmer of hope. "We can end the cycle, Jeremiah." Jeremiah sneered, but deep down he felt the truth of Clay's words. The reality of his choices pressed heavily upon him. This was not the way he had intended to protect his daughter. Isabel stepped closer to her father, tears glistening in her eyes. "I can't lose you or this town." An unbearable silence enveloped the three of them, thick with unspoken words. Clay seized the moment, daring to push further. "Let's make a deal. Marry me, Isabel." Silence hung heavy as Isabel processed the bold proposition, disbelief washing over her. "Marry you?" "Yes," Clay affirmed, his gaze unyielding and earnest. "A marriage of protection. If you're married, he will have to think twice about his actions." Jeremiah stepped back, processing the audacity of the sheriff's words. Confusion replaced anger as he felt the conflict within him. He asked, voice trembling with conflict, "She's not your pawn, Jeremiah." Clay shouted, voice filled with raw urgency. But the turmoil in Jeremiah was palpable. "And what about me? This can be a new beginning," Isabel implored, stepping closer to her father. "We can change the course of our lives." A battle raged in Jeremiah's eyes, a flicker of the man he once was competing with the anger he had built as a defense against the world. The silence stretched, an eternity wrapped in a heartbeat. Clay stepped forward, his heart pounding. "You still have the chance to redeem yourself." Striking a deeply vulnerable chord, Jeremiah gasped for breath. "I can't lose you again, Isabel." Tension filled the air like fog, oppressive and thick. Isabel reached for her father, feeling the love beneath the tumult. "You have to trust me, Dad. This is my choice and it's my life." Jeremiah faltered, and in that moment the ferocity of love outweighed his rage. The battle within him began to turn in favor of possibility. Clay felt the fragile heartbeat of hope begin to pulse within him. "Let's do this together. We've turned chaos into clarity tonight." With a deep breath, Jeremiah straightened his posture. "Fine." A sense of relief washed over Clay as he turned to Isabel. Before the tension could build, the townsfolk who had been watching stepped forward, their eyes filled with support for Isabel, for Clay, for what they all could build together. Clay addressed the crowd, his voice steady and proud. "Gather a preacher." The atmosphere transformed, excitement crackling like electricity. Isabel felt her heart race, fluttering with both fear and anticipation. As the preacher arrived, he looked at the trio, recognizing a pivotal moment in their lives. "I do," Clay replied, his voice unwavering, a promise to protect her in every sense. "I do," she responded, the sincerity and conviction flowing through her veins. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, applause erupted from the townsfolk, their joy filling the air with a sense of renewal. In that moment, Isabel felt the heaviness of her past dissolve, replaced by the warmth of a bright future. Jeremiah stood back, watching the scene unfold, feeling the chain that had bound him to darkness begin to break. A sense of pride and acceptance flooded his heart, knowing he could still play a role in Isabel's life, a protector instead of a predator. In the days that followed, life took on a new rhythm. Clay and Isabel built a new home, laughter and love filling the walls where fear once lingered. The townspeople rallied around them, their support forging a strong sense of community. Jeremiah, slowly learning how to walk the path of redemption, found solace in his new role. The shadows receded as he stepped away from the violent past, discovering strength in vulnerability and love. Together, they created something beautiful, an intricate tapestry woven together with threads of care, empathy, and renewed purpose. Ironwood prospered as a testament to transformation, where the sheriff had married the outlaw's daughter not out of obligation, but as a courageous act of love. Together, they proved that amidst chaos lay the seeds for a profound legacy, a legacy built on hope and the belief that families can heal, even from the most broken pasts. As Clay and Isabel stood side by side, looking over the town that had become their home, they knew they had forged a bond that transcended the darkness. In their hearts, they carried the power to change everything, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. From the ashes of their shared pain, Ironwood would rise, stronger than ever, forever entwined in the narrative of love and resilience. The sun dipped low over the horizon, bathing the small town of Ironwood in a gold-tinted glow. It was the kind of evening when the world felt tranquil, deceivingly calm, but the air felt electric. In the distance, a rider appeared, her silhouette stark against the fading light. Isabel Allen, the daughter of the notorious outlaw, rode into town with a sense of urgency coursing through her veins. She was running not just for herself, but for the town she loved. As she dismounted, her heart raced. She had heard whispers, felt the cold breath of fear creeping up her spine. Her father, Jeremiah Allen, was rumored to be planning something reckless, something dangerous, and she needed to warn the sheriff. She hurried through the dusty streets, glancing over her shoulder as if the shadows might come alive with pursuit. The sheriff's office came into view, a stone structure that stood proudly at the heart of town. The old wooden door creaked as she pushed it open, the sound slicing through the silence. Sheriff Clay Hawthorne looked up, his sharp blue eyes widening in surprise. He had spent years building a reputation as a protector of Ironwood, a tough but fair leader who faced danger without flinching. But he had never been prepared for this, a desperate young woman, the outlaw's daughter, bursting into his office looking like a storm about to break. "Clay." Isabel's voice trembled, urgency pulling at every word. Clay rose to his feet, his instincts kicking in. "I think my father is coming for me. He believes I can help him pull off one last job, a robbery that could bring ruin to this town." The gravity of her words settled into Clay's chest like a stone. He had heard tales of Jeremiah Allen, the man who had once fought for justice but had spiraled into lawlessness. Clay felt the tension rise, knowing that if Jeremiah came for his daughter and found her here, an explosion of violence would follow. Clay asked, fighting to keep his voice calm as adrenaline surged through him. Isabel shook her head, her eyes wide with panic. "I don't know, but he has men with him, ruthless men who will follow his orders without question." "Then we need a plan," Clay said, already generating ideas in his mind. The shadows danced around them as they moved through the dense tension. Clay had always admired Isabel's strength. She was fierce, loyal, and somehow unyielding despite her circumstances. He felt a deepening respect for her, even a connection that made his heart race. They began to devise a strategy, their voices low and urgent. Clay could see the spark of determination igniting in Isabel's eyes as she spoke about her father's decline, how a once proud man had become a ghost of his former self, lost to regret and anger. With each story, Clay felt the weight of her torment, and the threat of her father's return loomed larger. "We can lure him out," Clay suggested. Isabel nodded. "He needs to think he can still control me." There was a fire in her spirit that ignited something deep within Clay. As the plan unfolded, he promised to protect her, not just from her father but from the darkness threatening to swallow them both. The night deepened, enveloping Ironwood in shadows as they prepared. The dust hung in the air like a witching spell, thick and ominous. Clay felt as if the entire town was holding its breath, teetering on the edge of chaos. Then, just as they'd set the plan into motion, the unmistakable sound of horse hooves thundered toward them. Fear gripped Clay's heart and he turned to Isabel. The door swung open, and standing before them was Jeremiah Allen, cloaked in shadow, eyes aflame with anger and desperation. Clay stood tall, ready to protect Isabel at all costs, as the weight of the moment sharpened the air around them. Jeremiah bellowed, his voice filling the room like a storm. "Jeremiah, you need to leave," Clay said firmly, positioning himself between the outlaw and Isabel. Jeremiah's voice cracked, a mix of love and rage flooding through him. "She's mine." Isabel stepped out from behind Clay, her spirit unwavering. "Dad, please, this is not the answer." Jeremiah's expression shifted momentarily, revealing a flicker of confusion, then anger as he sized Clay up. "I can't let you hurt her or this town," Clay replied, his heart pounding with the weight of his words. "Your choices have consequences, Jeremiah." Tension crackled in the air, thick and suffocating. Isabel felt the pulse of impending chaos rising, and her heart raced as she faced her father's wrath. She had watched him slowly fade into darkness, and now, standing against him felt like standing against a force of nature. But Clay stepped closer, accessing every ounce of courage. He felt an inexplicable connection with Isabel, a pull that intensified with each second they faced this danger together. "You can't keep doing this, Jeremiah." Jeremiah shouted, frustration laced through his voice as he raked his hand through his hair. Isabel's voice rang true, slicing through the anger. "You're doing this all wrong. I love you, Dad, but I can't be part of your destruction anymore." Clay watched the battle play out in Jeremiah's eyes, a fierce struggle between love for his daughter and the destructive power that had engulfed him. The silence screamed between them, stretching like a taut wire ready to snap. "Let's make a deal," Clay said suddenly, a boldness surging through him. "Marry her, it'll keep her safe." Jeremiah sneered, incredulous. Clay replied, his heart racing, "It will show your loyalty and love." Jeremiah's face twisted as he processed the suggestion, a mix of anger and confusion brewing deep within him. "This isn't just a game," Clay pressed, voice firm. "You can choose a different path." The tension in the room was palpable, thick as smoke. Isabel stood quietly, feeling the weight of the moment. "Dad, I want to marry him," she said, her voice steady. Jeremiah's eyes widened as the reality sank in. "I'll take that chance." Isabel's determination flooded the room, battling against the years of conflict. Jeremiah's fists clenched tightly at his sides. Isabel shot back, stepping closer. "I'm willing to stand for what's right." The air crackled with unresolved emotions, and in that moment Jeremiah looked lost. He whispered, pain creeping into his voice. Clay stepped forward, the urgency of the situation pressing upon him. Jeremiah hesitated, deep sorrow mingling with confusion as he saw the resolve in Isabel's eyes. Slowly, the weight of regret settled over him, and for the first time he considered that maybe losing her might lead to a different freedom, a chance for everyone to reclaim their lives. "Then let's do it," he said finally, understanding cutting through. "If this is what you both want, I won't stand in your way." Relief washed over Clay, and he turned to the crowd gathering outside, sensing the community's eyes upon them. "Gather around." The townsfolk surged forward, concern in their eyes giving way to hope as realization of what was unfolding sunk in. Isabel looked back at Clay, her heart pounding in her chest. "Yes," she whispered, feeling the warmth of his presence like a lifeline. As the preacher arrived, he glanced at this unusual gathering, recognizing the significance of this union. "I do," he answered, a fierce conviction filling his voice. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, the crowd erupted in cheers, the sound ringing with hope and unity. It was as if a spell had lifted off Ironwood, and the promise of a new beginning filled the air, sparkling like the stars overhead. Jeremiah watched, a wave of emotion crashing over him. Relief mingled with pride as he realized that perhaps their connection could endure, transformed into something beautiful rather than destructive. Through the days that followed, the fabric of their lives began to weave itself anew. Clay and Isabel built a shared life, laughter illuminating the corners once shadowed by fear. With each passing day, Jeremiah slowly learned how to step away from the past he had known. He witnessed the bond between his daughter and Clay grow stronger, and he began to see hope for himself as well. The shadows that had held him captive began to recede, unveiling the man he could be, one who could love and protect. Ironwood transformed alongside them, a community reborn, where healing became more powerful than anger. Clay and Isabel's love took root, becoming an anchor for others who had lost their way. Together, they ushered in a new era built on trust and respect. Underneath the vast expanse of the night sky, Clay and Isabel stood hand in hand, gazing toward the horizon that held infinite possibilities. In a world filled with uncertainty, they had chosen to forge their own path, one where love had triumphed over fear. And as the sun rose each day, illuminating Ironwood, it also lit the hearts of those who understood that even amidst chaos, hope was a relentless force. In the light, they embraced their futures, all together as a united family, bound not by the chains of the past, but by the strength of their shared choices and newfound freedom. The moon was a sliver hanging low over the dusty streets of Ironwood, its faint light struggling to penetrate the late-night shadows. Anxiety hung in the air, thick as smoke, as a lone rider emerged from the darkness, urgency propelling her forward. Isabel Allen, the outlaw's daughter, was racing against time, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. She could feel the echoes of her father's footsteps closing in, the man who had once shielded her from the world now threatening to shatter everything she held dear. Isabel dismounted in front of the sheriff's office, the wooden door creaking ominously as she pushed it open. Inside, Sheriff Clay Hawthorne, a man of unwavering resolve, looked up from behind his desk. Tension seeped into his every gesture. He could sense trouble, and tonight it didn't just have the essence of the usual ruckus. Isabel gasped, panic surging through her. Clay stood, eyes narrowing as he registered her desperation. "Isabel," she said, shaking with fear. "He's lost it." Clay's heart sank. Jeremiah Allen, the notorious outlaw, had been a force to be reckoned with, a man once respected, now a threat spiraling into chaos. Clay asked, determination setting his jaw. "I don't know, he never tells me his plans," Isabel replied, the tremor in her voice making his skin prickle. "But he has men with him." Every instinct within Clay screamed at him to protect her. "We need to get you out of town," he suggested, urgency swirling between them. Isabel stopped him, her eyes fierce. "If I run, he'll come for the town. I can't leave them unprotected." Clay felt a wave of respect wash over him for her bravery. Isabel wasn't just some cowardly daughter hiding behind her father. She was a woman ready to face her fate. But Clay knew how dangerous Jeremiah was. "Then we need a different plan." Isabel nodded, her gaze sharpening. "You mean make him think I'm still involved in his schemes?" "Exactly. If he thinks he can control you, he'll come for you." "We'll have the town ready," Clay replied, adrenaline coursing through him. They began formulating their strategy, voices low but urgent. Clay was struck by the fire within Isabel, the passion mixed with the shadows of fear. He saw glimpses of her past, the life she had led under a father who had strayed too far from the light, who now loomed like a storm cloud over her future. Then, as they prepared, the unmistakable sound of hooves thundered toward them. Clay's heart raced. Commanded, adrenaline sharpening his senses as the tension thickened. The door burst open, and there he was, Jeremiah Allen, a figure cloaked in darkness, flanked by gritty men with hardened faces. The air crackled with danger as Clay stood tall, ready for confrontation. Jeremiah growled, scanning the dim office. "She's not here anymore, Jeremiah," Clay said, his voice firm. "You need to leave." Jeremiah's eyes narrowed. "You think you can keep her from me?" Isabel's voice rang out, trembling yet fierce. "This isn't the way." Jeremiah's expression shifted, the anger in his gaze waning. "You think I have a choice? You think I don't care?" Isabel said, eyes flashing. Clay felt the tension in the room escalate, realizing they were standing on the precipice of violence. "Jeremiah, it doesn't have to be this way," he said, finding a firm conviction within him. A silent struggle flickered across Jeremiah's face, visibly battling between pride and desperation. Clay knew they needed to strike a chord to bring Jeremiah back from the edge. "Let us work together to protect Isabel. Marry her." Jeremiah looked taken aback, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "Marry her? You think that'll protect her?" "I think if you choose to protect her, you will think twice before causing destruction," Clay asserted. Isabel watched her father's reaction closely, desperate to reach him. "Dad, please. If this will keep the town safe, I'll do it." Jeremiah's face twisted in conflict, but deep down, she could see inkling threads of realization forming. He turned to Clay, anger still bubbling but mixed with a touch of vulnerability. "If I let her go, if I let you marry her?" "A father who loves his daughter enough to let her make her own choices," Clay replied, voice firm but warm. Tension hung thick between them, every heartbeat echoing like a drum. Isabel stepped closer to her father, sensing the battle within him. "I want to stand on my own 2 feet, Dad. This is my life." As the air crackled with tension, the struggle waged fiercely in Jeremiah's eyes. "You are willing to toss everything I've done aside," he whispered, the weight of regret pulling him down. Isabel shouted, tears welling in her eyes. "I want to build a future free from fear." Jeremiah hesitated, the resistance crumbling beneath Isabel's fierce love. His voice weakened, reality settling in. Clay seized the moment, stepping forward. "Let's do this together. We will find a way to make it right," he urged, courage spilling from him as he extended a hand. "Very well," Jeremiah said finally, surrendering to the reality. Clay turned to Isabel, hope igniting like wildfire in his chest. Before the words settled, the townsfolk began to gather outside, alerted by the commotion. They peeked through the wooden door, eyes shimmering with curiosity and concern. Clay called out to the crowd, hope spilling into his voice. "Gather around." Isabel felt her heart race, anticipation spinning through her. As the townsfolk gathered, a sense of unity washed over the place that had been steeped in fear for too long. As the preacher stepped forward, he glanced between the 3 of them, the sheriff, the daughter, and the outlaw. "I do," Clay declared, determination echoing in his voice. "Yes," Isabel replied, strength filling her voice and igniting the air. As they sealed their vows with a passionate kiss, the crowd erupted in cheers, a palpable energy rushing through Ironwood. In this stolen moment of joy, hope began to bloom like flowers breaking through the frost. But the distant sound of thunder rolled through the valley, ominous and foreboding. Clay turned, feeling a chill creep up his spine. The echo of hooves filled the air, and he turned back to see Jeremiah's face go pale, realization dawning like a storm cloud. "We're not alone," Jeremiah muttered, eyes widening with alarm. As the sound grew louder, a dark line of figures appeared on the horizon, riders cloaked in the very threats they had tried to evade. Clay's heart raced with urgency. He shouted, pushing Isabel behind him, instinct kicking in as adrenaline surged through his veins. The townsfolk tensed, and chaos began to ripple through the gathering. Clay loaded his revolver, feeling the weight of the moment crash over him. In an instant, he knew they hadn't escaped danger after all. It was barreling toward them with the force of a storm. Isabel clutched Clay's arm, fear tightening her grip. She gasped, eyes wide and desperate. Jeremiah took a step forward. "This isn't over." "I'll protect you, Isabel," Clay shouted to the townsfolk, his voice rising above the mounting panic, every remaining ounce of resolve swelling within him. As the host of outlaws thundered toward them, the fate of everyone in Ironwood hung in the balance. The silence before the storm was deafening, the clatter of hooves approaching like a harbinger of doom. And then the ride erupted into chaos, a swirling maelstrom of dust and screams, a reckoning that would change everything. In that instant, love battled against the impending darkness, the fragile bond forged just moments before now the last spark of hope amidst the chaos above. Clay and Isabel braced themselves, ready to face whatever storm lay ahead, not just as sheriff and daughter, but as partners ignited by a love that would either defy the darkness or be consumed by it. What would be raised from that chaotic fray? They couldn't know, but one thing was clear: their lives would never be the same again.